Hi everyone, how's it going? 2 months ago, I went and got a post office box thinking people might want an address for me or a place to send things, even encounters. And I've gotten 2 packages in 2 months. Well, I got 1 package and 1 letter. In this letter is a handwritten Bigfoot encounter that a man sent me from Memphis, Tennessee. The encounter, I think, happens in the early 70s. And I just want you to sit back, relax, and get ready for an unbelievable story. I think you're going to love it. All right, here we go. Who wrote this letter and mailed it to me, hand wrote the letter with an ink pen. His name is John. I'm not going to tell you his last name. He didn't require me to withhold it, but I'm not going to tell you who he is. And I think this is probably one of the best stories I've ever read. It's just unbelievable. My cousin Jamie and I grew up together. We were born 3 months apart. Our mothers are sisters. We lived just 2 blocks from each other in Memphis, Tennessee. As far back as I can remember, we were together, every waking minute. From the time we could crawl, we were best friends, like brothers. Some said that we looked like brothers, but Jamie was smaller and lighter than me. As we grew older, our interests followed different paths. I played baseball and football. Jamie liked to study and do well in school. He was a smart kid, much smarter than me. I could have cared less for academics. In the 3rd grade, Jamie won the school spelling bee. I could hardly write my name. When homework was impossible for me to do, Jamie would call and check on me to see how it was going. If I needed help, he was there. He got me through primary school. Some of the punks in 6th grade singled Jamie out and made his life miserable for a week or 2. When I found out about it, I settled that issue real fast, and he was never picked on again. Remarkably, as different as we were, we always got along. We loved each other and were together as much as possible. In 1974, the beginning of our 7th grade year, Jamie's mother and father split up. It hit him very hard. He withdrew from me for a while. His mother started dating soon after, and he was at our house 3 or 4 nights a week. We would talk about stuff all the time. We would stay up late in my bedroom or out in the yard and talk about everything under the sun until late at night. His grades began to drop by Christmas break, and by the time 7th grade was over, he was a medium C student. One of our favorite things about our lives was going to Mississippi to stay with our grandparents. They had a small farm in northwest Mississippi in the Delta. We would usually stay with them for 2 weeks around the 4th. It was one of the highlights of our summer break. I knew the shape Jamie was in, and I knew he needed to get away from his house. I called my grandfather in May and told him how Jamie was doing. I asked him if Jamie and I could stay with them all summer. I promised that we would work and help him around his place. Of course, my grandfather was all about that. He loved us, and we loved him. My grandfather called our mothers later in the month and arranged the whole thing. The day after school let out, Pawpaw showed up to get us and take us home with him. It was a great ride down to the farm. Windows open, country music playing low on his radio, and us laughing and joking all piled up in the front seat of his truck. We stopped and ate hamburgers just south of Memphis. I remember Jamie ate 3 hamburgers fully loaded. Pawpaw just kept buying him burgers, and we laughed and laughed at him. His belly looked like a basketball. This was good. Jamie was happy to be getting out of town. We arrived at the farm later that night. My grandmother had supper warming on the stove, and we ate again, even though we were all full. That is what you do for your grandmother when she cooks. You eat every bite. Pawpaw woke us up before daylight the next morning and said that we were going fishing. I could hardly drag myself out of bed, But I finally got moving and we were off to catch some brim from a series of lakes that are scattered all over the Mississippi Delta. Brim bed up in June, and back then you could fill a cooler with big bull-headed shell crackers and black brim. We took all sorts of shortcuts to get there. On the way we passed a gravel road just past my grandfather's property, and I could see an old barn way back in the woods. It looked interesting to me. I asked Pawpaw about it. He told us to stay out of those woods in a very stern voice. It surprised me a little. The fun mood was dampened a bit, and all of us were quiet for a while. Of course, we started asking why we couldn't go back there, but we never got an answer. Needless to say, 2 14-year-old boys now wanted to know what was in those woods and around that old barn, but we didn't say anything else about it. We fished all morning. We got back home and cleaned the fish. It had been a great day. For the next 2 weeks, we worked on Pawpaw's farm. The work was hard, but Jamie and I made it fun. We were always messing with each other. We would work until 2 or 3 and then play all afternoon. Pawpaw let us use an old farm truck to drive around and run errands for him. About twice a week, we would load a boat in the bed, hit a local lake, and fish until dark. We were mobile and free to go just about anywhere we wanted. It was starting out to be the best summer of our lives. The hot summer days with the sun darkening our bare backs and the fun we were having, no matter what we were doing, was exactly what we needed. I saw Jamie slowly begin to act like the kid I grew up with. He was forgetting all the crap that was going on at home. Everything was working out just like I had planned. My grandfather sent us to a feed store the next Friday to pick up something or another, so Jamie and I jumped in the old Ford and took off. As we traveled down the dusty gravel road, I noticed that area that Pawpaw warned us to stay out of. Naturally, we pulled right into the drive. Jamie unhitched the gate and we were in. We drove half a mile to the old barn down an unkempt gravel drive and got out to take a look around. The place was abandoned years ago and was all grown up. It was especially thick now that the heat had made all the weeds and vines begin to once again take over everything in sight. We walked to an opening in the old barn. We pulled the vines down and apart and we walked in. After our eyes adjusted to the darkness inside, we saw all sorts of farm equipment. It was like all the stuff had been parked and just left there. Everything was covered with dust and dirt, but none of it was junk. We saw 2 old Ford tractors and several implements in perfect condition, neatly parked in an organized manner. It made no sense. Even though the machines were old and outdated, it was still usable stuff. Jamie made it to the back of the barn and called me over to see something. There was an old tool shed with the door partially open. The door creaked and dragged the dirt on the ground when we opened it further. It was too dark to see inside, but with the little light we had, we could see all sorts of tools and gadgets hanging on the walls and stacked in bins along the wall. The floor was especially dark. It looked like a bottomless pit. I assumed it was just dark, and so I stepped inside. I immediately discovered that it was a hole in the ground because I fell in. Why would I ever expect a deep hole in the floor of a tool shed? Falling several feet, smacking the walls as I tumbled, twisting in contorted positions as I fell, I finally hit the bottom. Gathering my wits about me, I stood up. I could just see a little light at the top. Jamie was yelling for me. He later told me he didn't know how far I had fallen into the blackness. I told him that I was okay. I think I was maybe 10 or 12 feet down in the hole. My eyes began to adjust a bit more, and I could see roots hanging from the walls of the round hole, silhouetted against the dim light coming from above. I grabbed one, then another, and slowly began my climb out. It was not easy. I fell back down twice and had to start over, but on the third try, I was able to grab Jamie's hand, and he hoisted me out. I'm not embarrassed to say that I was shaken up a little. Jamie laughed at me and he said, "Man, you stink." I had not noticed any odors, but after he said that, it hit me. I stunk to high heaven of some sort of animal crap. In the light outside, we could see that my left leg was covered in the putrid slime. It covered my jeans leg from my boot to my hip. I had it all over my hands and my face too. Dang, I must have landed in a pile, I yelled out, and I started chasing Jamie around the truck, grabbing gobs of that green stuff off my jeans and slinging it at him. We laughed and laughed. When we were out of breath, we stopped and started wiping the big chunks off my legs. I wanted a shower more than anything. We were almost ready to leave when Jamie stopped. He cocked his head at an angle and said, "Shh, listen." Everything got real quiet, and we heard heavy footsteps coming from the other side of the barn. "What is that?" I whispered. "Shut up," was his reply. We heard the steps getting closer, and then I heard it enter the entrance on the other side of the barn. It walked in, and it stopped. We could hear it breathing, heavy and deep breaths from something really big. At first I thought it was a landowner who was about to lay into us for being on his property, but after hearing that breathing and those footsteps, I knew it was no man. It started moving again. We were motionless. The door to the tool shed opened and we heard wood scraping and all sorts of noises from inside that barn. Then it sounded like the thing jumped into that hole that I had just pulled myself from. Then there was silence. We stood there looking at each other, not knowing what to do. I finally broke the silence with a whisper again and asked Jamie if he wanted to go in and see what that thing was. He said, "Hell no, let's get the F out of here." We slowly moved to the truck, and as quiet as a mouse, we slid into the bench seat. I turned the key and the truck fired right up. Throwing it into gear too soon, I grinded the gears, and the noise was like fingernails on a chalkboard. I mashed the clutch again and felt the transmission lock in, and backwards we went. The truck wheeled around. I got it into a forward gear and punched the gas pedal. We lurched forward and sped down the gravel drive. We got to the gate and I stopped. I felt like we were far enough away from whoever it was that we could close the gate so that no one would know we had been there. Jamie refused to get out of the truck and close the gate. I didn't want to argue, so I ran back to the gate and started to pull it closed. I looked ahead at the truck, and Jamie was standing outside the door staring behind me. I got the gate closed and turned to see what he was looking at. Through all the dust, I could make out a giant figure standing outside the old barn in the middle of the road we had just traveled. It just stood there looking at us. I was locked onto this thing. I could not take my eyes off it. I assumed Jamie was the same. Finally, it moved. It jumped forward and started running at us real fast. It was running on legs and arms, and it was moving fast, kicking up dust and gravel behind it. Suddenly, snapped out of my stare, I ran back and jumped in the truck. Jamie was already there. We sped down the few yards left of the drive and took a hard left at full speed onto the gravel road. Jamie was looking back through the rear glass. A few seconds later, he said, "That thing is still chasing us." "What?" I yelled. "Look over there." He pointed to my left and behind us. The thing was paralleling us in the woods. It was behind us, but it was gaining, and it had an angle to its travel that would connect with us in the road in just a few yards. I floored it, and we were pressed back into our seats. It was still tracking with us, but it was not gaining. Soon it was out of view. We had outpaced the animal. Pawpaw was around the back when we pulled into the driveway. The first thing he asked us to do was put the sweet feed in the barn, but we had never made it to the feed store. What were we going to tell him? Jamie jumped out and got his attention while I ran to the side of the house and started spraying my jeans off with the garden hose. Soon they both walked around the corner, and here I was washing monster shit off of my leg. "What are you doing?" Pawpaw asked. I just stared at him. He waited for an answer, and I had nothing to say. Jamie finally spoke up and told him that we had hit a deer and had gotten out to look at it and started messing around. He told him that he had pushed me onto the deer and I had gotten deer crap all over my leg. He finished the lie with a stupid fake laugh that my grandfather did not buy. Pawpaw walked closer and looked at the green stuff all over me and said, "That's not deer crap, John. That's the contents of a deer's stomach. I can smell it. Take those clothes off before you go in. Your grandmother will shoot you if you stink her house up." Jamie laughed some more and said, Yeah, Pawpaw, that's what I meant to say." We had no idea what the contents of a deer's stomach looked like, but we went with that story. My grandfather walked off shaking his head. I'm sure wondering how his daughters had produced such stupid sons. But I didn't care. I did not want him to know we had been to that place. It looked like we were in the clear for now, but later, circumstances would force me to admit what we had done. The 4th of July came and went. Our families had come to the farm. We cooked a pig in the ground. We shot off fireworks. We had a great time. Everyone left for home, and we were back to work and fishing for the rest of the summer. Not too long after the 4th, we were out with Pawpaw in one of his fields. We sat on the tailgate of his truck while he ran his cultivator down several rows of purple hull peas he had put out that year. We heard a loud clang and looked his way. Pawpaw was off the tractor cussing. His cultivator had broken in half, and he wasn't finished with the job. He was upset that he could not get those weeds out of that field and that it would be murder to pick those peas the next month with all the chiggers that would be in those weeds. He left the tractor in the field, and we headed back to the house. What I'm about to tell you may sound crazy. Actually, it was crazy, but at the time it made sense to Jamie. Here's why. There is something inherent in a boy's genetic makeup that craves approval from older male figures in his life who he respects. Every boy wants a pat on the head from his father, his grandfather, a teacher, his coach, whoever, telling him that he measures up. We were no different than any pair of 14-year-old boys ever born. Jamie wanted to impress Pawpaw, and he had been working out a plan in his mind all afternoon. While we laid in bed that night, Jamie rolled over and said, "There was a good cultivator in that barn sitting on a trailer. Let's go over there tomorrow and hook it up so that Pawpaw can finish the job. When he is done, we can just take it right back." "Are you crazy?" I asked. "Maybe," Jamie said. "I am the cousin who always took chances. The bookworm never did anything dangerous in his life. I suppose after 2 months of freedom, work, and having fun, Mr. Bookworm had gained some confidence. I still said, no way am I going back to where that monster lives. After a minute, Jamie said, "We can watch the place from the road for a while. If we don't see any activity, then we can back right in there, hook that trailer up, and be gone in 5 minutes. It'll be easy." "Shut up and go to sleep, stupid," I said, and I rolled over and forgot about it. When I woke the next morning, Jamie was gone. The truck was gone. I knew where he was, but how was I going to tell my grandfather? Drastic events require extreme decision-making skills that I did not have at that time, but I found Pawpaw and told him the whole story anyway. He told me to jump in the truck and he screamed at me, "We have to go get him now!" On the fast drive to the monster farm, Pawpaw said, "Jamie has been gone for almost 2 hours. He should have been back by now. I told you boys not to go in there." I had a sick feeling in my stomach. What would we find in that evil place? We pulled into the open gate. As we rolled up to the barn, I could see the front end of the truck sticking out of the big door that we had entered. There was no activity outside the barn. Pawpaw got out and told me to sit tight, but there was no way I was going to sit in that truck, so I got out too. Pawpaw looked at me like he could have shot me, but didn't say anything. With a flashlight in hand, we walked cautiously into the barn. Things looked different with all the light shining in there. The place was torn to pieces. Heavy farm equipment was scattered about. 2 pieces lay on the trailer where the cultivator sat the last time that we were there. I never saw the cultivator, and I didn't see Jamie. I walked over beside the trailer and finally found a boot on the ground. It was Jamie's. My stomach turned over. That thing had gotten him. I just knew it. We looked further and still found nothing but the one boot. Finally, I pointed to the tool shed door, and I told Pawpaw that we should look in there. We opened the door, and the smell hit us. It was the smell of rotting flesh and decaying animals. He shined his light down into the hole, and we saw a leg. It was Jamie. I assumed he was dead. Pawpaw handed me the light and jumped down in the foul-smelling muck. He reached up for the light and shined about inside the area that I could not see from my vantage point. Apparently, the hole turned into some sort of cave. I never saw that while I was in there the month earlier. Jamie's leg twitched. Then Pawpaw fell to his knees and quickly pulled Jamie out. "He's alive," I heard him say. He yelled at me to give him a hand. I laid flat on my stomach and grabbed Jamie's shirt and started pulling while my grandfather pushed him up. We got him out and drug him onto the floor of the main barn, and then I went back to pull Pawpaw out. Once out, we dragged Jamie to the truck, threw him in the bed. Pawpaw told me to drive us out, and I did. I saw them in the bed of the truck. Pawpaw was holding Jamie close to his chest and talking to him, rubbing his hair back. We made it off the property without any trouble. We drove Jamie straight to the county hospital 30 minutes away. I watched the ER people push him inside on a rolling stretcher, and I didn't see or hear anything for a long time. By the time the doctors came out to talk to us, my grandmother was there, as well as two of my uncles and some other people in their families. The waiting room was full. My mother and my aunt were en route and would be there soon. The doctor took my grandfather and me aside, and he began to speak. "Jamie is okay," he said. "He has a broken arm and some deep cuts in his chest. We stitched him up and we set his arm. It's not a bad break, but he is in shock. Can you tell me what happened to him?" the doctor asked. I started to speak up, and Pawpaw put his hand across my chest and he cut me off. Then he said to the doctor, "Jamie fell in a hole I was digging to bury trash in. It was about 15 feet deep. It was a pretty nasty fall, doctor." "Okay," the doctor replied. "That accounts for the broken arm, but it does not explain the mental condition that Jamie is in. Boys fall and break bones all the time, but they do not go into shock. Tell me what else happened." My grandfather just looked at the doctor. After a short staring contest, the doctor finally said, "All right, I will not allow anyone to see Jamie until his mother arrives, and then only she can come in. You need to prepare her for what she will see when she gets into the room." Pawpaw nodded, and we went back to the waiting room. Days passed, and Jamie did not improve. He sat up in his bed, staring at the wall, shaking his head in a quick jerking motion for days. The doctors didn't know what to do. Physically, he was healthy, but emotionally, he was a bag of hammers. They finally released Jamie to his mother, and we drove back to Memphis. School started a few weeks later, and Jamie was exactly the same. No improvement. I would go see him every day after school and talk to him. The head twitches went away, and Jamie appeared to relax a bit. He didn't speak, nor did he move his eyes to focus on anything. Fall, winter, spring, the whole seasons passed, and finally school let out again in May. On the first day of summer break, I went straight to Jamie's house and sat with him for several hours. His mom had set up a TV in his room and had it on all day. She would turn it off at night and Jamie would sleep. The next day, the routine started all over again. And then one night in August, I was sitting by his bed watching a TV show. He just sat there staring past the screen as usual. A news show came on, and they were featuring an old rerun of the Patterson-Gimlin footage. The report was about a local man who claimed he was being harassed by a Bigfoot. The TV people made a joke of it, but I watched intently. They ran the footage of Patty several times. I looked over at Jamie, and his eyes were focused on the TV. This is the first time I had seen anything human from him since the previous summer. The program ended, and I looked over at Jamie again, and he was sitting straighter up. I moved to the bed and started talking to him. His eyes blinked at me, and he started talking. "That thing grabbed me by the arm and threw me in that hole," he said. "He threw me in there with all the other dead animals. He was going to eat me, John. When you pulled up to the barn, it let me go and jumped out of the hole and took off. You guys got there just in time." I must have looked stupid staring at him, but I couldn't think of anything to say. I finally asked him if he remembered us getting him out of there. Did he remember the hospital? Anything. I was just trying to get him to talk, and he did. We talked for several minutes. I got his mother in there. I called my mom and then my pawpaw. Everyone was ecstatic that he had come out of his condition. Over the next few days, Jamie improved. Eventually, he came outside with me one night, and we laid on our backs in the yard looking at the stars and talked about a lot of things, just like we used to do before the event. I had my cousin, my brother, and my best friend back. Over the next few weeks, he talked more about what the beast did to him. It was horrifying stuff. He asked about the old fort, and I told him Pawpaw and some other men had gone in there and got it back. By the end of the summer, he was back to normal. We even spent another summer down at the farm when we were 18 and about to head off to college. We started school the next year, and everything was just like it used to be. We are both grown men now with families. We live in different states, but we talk once every week and see each other at holiday and family events. We never told many people about his episode with the Alpha Bigfoot. We did talk about it to some trusted Bigfoot researchers. They wanted to know if Jamie and I were ever interested in going out with them on Bigfoot excursions. Our answer was always no. We knew everything we needed to know about that subject. Finally, they stopped asking us.